starting with talking about if you have a covering, some kind of a metal covering, that uses a cover for the pot, you have to do hagola to that cover. Since it has Zei'ah come up to it all the time from the heat of the pot, therefore you have to kasher. So before we really get to this, I'm going to introduce it by saying there's two places in Yarden where it talks about the din of Zei'ah, which is to say when you cook up a liquid, the vapors that come out of it are considered to have the same din as the liquid that they came from, even though they seem to be sort of not really there in the interim. But when they eventually turn to something else, they're considered to have the din. One is by schnapps, that's a rivash. We'll talk about that more the next time. The rivash says that the vapors, when you make schnapps, you boil the vapors out, you boil the alcohol out, and then it condenses that. So people wanted to say that those vapors are not usher, even though the original thing was usher. The original liquid was tam yayin. It's not usher because it turned into a vapor in between. So he says, no, we'll talk about more next week. They say, no, it disappeared. It doesn't. It's like a new.
Where did it come from?
It's like a new thing. It's like
so people about this.
Right. So that's one place where it says it's not true. That it's not true. The Zei'ah coming out of a liquid is considered to have the same din. And the other place is a more traditional bus b'chol. I think the case is you're cooking in milk, and there's meat, salami is drying, hanging to dry. That the Zei'ah from the liquid that goes up makes the salami straight. Okay, if I remember that was the case. It was the milk was hitting the meat that's hanging above it. The vapors of milk that come up make the thing on top of it treif. It makes it, in that case, it makes the bus b'chol. Okay. What about the other way around? Now that it made the salami treif, what about is the milk treif? We got the Zei'ah going up, it hits the thing on the top, it makes that treif. What about, can it make the pot below it treif? That. So for that, the Ramah says, if you see condensation on the bottom of the top thing, in this case on the bottom of the salami, you see some condensation forming, then we say that condensation drip back down to the bottom pot. And we don't say that they're connected to each other and there's an automatic transfer time. And Ramah makes a deal, the way the Ramah says it is that you have to see condensation on the bottom. You don't assume that happens. If you see condensation there, then you say it drips back down into the bottom pot and the bottom pot becomes straight.
Is touching good enough too if you feel moist, or you have to?
No. Well, if it's any kind of a moisture that you see there, then you're going to say maybe that moisture dripped back down. Otherwise, you just say you just got absorbed and it just didn't come back. So this is very negate. This din of Zei'ah is negate to ovens and microwaves. That's how they become treif and like that. But I'm going to not talk about that. Those both have special places later. Rich Hashem will get to them with more of their shiloh, what their shiloh is. I'm going to leave that for now. But that is very much negate. A case that we can't talk about is a faucet. When you kasher your sink for Pesach, so people just, of course the sink you have to kasher, but the truth is the faucet also gets shaped because when the simple case, the guy strains noodles in his sink, so he pours the noodles in, and the Zei'ah coming out of that, what we say is a double gush, pouring up out of that thing, makes the Zei'ah that's rising up makes the faucet hamsik. Okay? Or if you pour it over and it hits it, then obviously that's a simple case that makes the chametz. Okay, so the way you kasher, the din is like this: that Zei'ah that comes out of a liquid is considered iru klivushin. It's considered not the klivushin; it's like pouring from the klivushin. So you kasher it also with iru klivushin, and we'll see. This has something to do with we talked about once before here. At the end of Tafnun Beis, that you could since the bliya happens through Zei'ah, you could kasher through Zei'ah also. Okay, since the bliya happens through a Zei'ah, through an iru kind of a Zei'ah, you can kasher like that also. Okay, so that's all before our din. That's the regular din of Zei'ah. Our din is saying something stronger than Zei'ah. Our din is not plain old Zei'ah. Our din is what you call Hevel hakatera. That when you have a pot and the pot is covered, and there's a very small headspace between the food and the top of the pot, and it's a very confined area because the thing is covered over the cover. So in that small confined area, the Beis Yosef says it's like the whole thing is filled with liquid. Then it's not a matter of like an irui from the pot up to the cover, and we have to say maybe the tom does go down or doesn't go down. No, it's considered like it's completely solid, filled up with liquid, and there's a full transfer of tom, and the cover is considered klivushin. That's what Artin is saying, that the cover is not irui klivushin. The cover in a pot like that is considered a full klivushin, and it has to be kashered as a full plain old.
Sometimes they have a hole in the cover. Does that change the status?
If it has an exhaust,
right? Exhaust. Those ones that are called pressure cookers.
You took away the pressure cooker?
No, regular pot.
Regular pot has a whole sort of seasoning style.
Yeah, it's like a little adjustable flap to move to the back and forth.
Okay, and let's do a lot of showers.
It's a hard man.
I'm not sure.
Keep covered too.
Well, why should it be Irui anyway?
What?
Why should it be Irui?
Why should it be Irui?
Yeah.
Because, okay, tell me why. What's
Because
your
the cover is hot,
Yes.
right? So even if it would be Irui, if you're into hot kettle,
Mm-hmm.
is that Irui?
If you do Irui from a Kli Rishon into a hot Kli,
Yeah. Why should it's not? Right? The Real Shabbos would say it's not.
okay.
Right? You can't reuse the cup 10 times and they say it's always cliche.
Right, you know.
So whoever also
So we should say, so why don't we consider Kli Rishon not because of the Beis Yosef's Rishon? Say it's a Kli Rishon because the thing is burning hot. It's sitting on top of the
It's all each too. It's on the fire itself.
right, but it's not the pot that the food is in. The food is in the pot, and then the cover is separate. It's a separate piece.
But
But he's
you
saying
connect it to the pot.
so let's say the time can't transfer through the pot into the cover.
Why? It's not the cover on here. Don't tell me there's no bleach that doesn't go in.
Yeah, only if there are liquids. You have to
You need a
It's just liquid anyway.
Okay, that's the point though. So
Let's say you took the pot off the fire, and then you put the cover on.
Yeah, right.
Oh, that's okay.
He's telling you now.
You can cash just because it's correct. Okay.
Okay.
Then fine.
You don't know. Okay.
Anyway, doesn't matter.
We saw this.
okay, it's a good question. Okay, so maybe that's the answer to this question. I'm not sure, but that's a good question. So why don't we say it's let's say it would be Irui anyhow. Irui into this burning hot cover should make it into a Kli Rishon anyhow. Okay, I'm not sure. Okay, and about your thing about whether if there's an escape, it would depend. The Beis Yosef is saying like there's this big, heavy, thick cloud. Probably he's right that there's a tiny little escape out of it. That's not going to make them. There's still going to be a nice build up anyhow.
Yeah.
I mean, every pot, stuff leaks out the edges also. Okay. Okay, so now I thought of a different case. Not with just a little thing like that. But what happens if you have a kettle in a plant? Okay, where it's not like in your house that the pot comes 90% full. I mean, a kettle is a lot bigger than a pot. Okay, and there's a nicer amount of headspace. My assumption was that it still has the same thing as Hevel because it's not a 4-gallon, 4-quart pot. It's a 50-gallon pot. So that amount of space relative is considered a small amount of space. Okay,
Or a soup kettle in a kitchen.
or a soup kettle, right? I was
It's a
assuming.
common thing.
In which case, those covers then are going to be considered a full Kli Rishon for the Kashering, not just an Irui.
Right. Even though there's like a gap, and I'll tell you where, not much a gap, because when they open it, the soup pours out sometimes. Some of them have it where there's a spout, or it's on the bottom of the spout. That's a different trial about Kashering it. But again, even though it would be a gap like that, it would still be Irui.
Unless it's this huge hole. Okay, I'm going to get to a different case in a second of a bigger hole. Okay. We had Zei'ah, and we have Hevel there, which is our din, it's more than that, but there's an opposite din. Okay, there's an opposite case, a lower din, that's the din of Reichah. That we paskin that Reichah, when you cook dry things in an oven, those things don't give off Zei'ah. Zei'ah comes from liquid things. They give off what we call Reichah. But we hold that Reichah there is something to Reichah.
Milsi.
We pass in Reichah Lav Milsi. But Reichah Lav Milsi, he means that so little time comes out of the dry food that it's not enough to be nourishing time to the next food. Okay? But it's not that no time comes out of it. It's not that something does come out, but the amount that comes out is so little that it's not enough to be nourishing time to something else. It's always bottled when it comes into the next food. And that's why, you're not allowed to do Reichah. You're not allowed to cook milk and a place next to each other and say, it's just going to be Reichah. Even though we're passing Reichah Lav Milsa means that by the time it gets into the other thing, it'll be bottled. But you're not allowed to do that. As a type of bittul isl'achatila, yes. It's a kind of a bittul isl'achatila to cook it, but b'di'evet, almost every case is mutter. Okay, there's a whole bunch of cases, it's in your day, there's a bunch of cases. Just about every case is mutter b'di'evet, and just about every case is isl'achatila. Okay, there's exceptions on both sides. There are cases that are mutter l'chatila and cases that are asur b'di'evet, but basically, it's always mutter l'chatila, always asur l'chatila, mutter b'di'evet. And the exception is, because of this thing, because the Reichah has a tiny amount of time to it, on Pesach, we say, except the Makal Hefsed Ruba, we say that Reichah is milsi. If you cook two dry things next to each other, then you would say Reichah is milsi because Chametz is mashu. So even though there's only a tiny amount transferring, that mashu that transfers is past the food. Okay, that's except Ramos says Makal Hefsed Ruba, we say that Reichah is milsi for Pesach. Okay. Now, this is the end. There's really something else that I'm skipping now, which we'll do next week. Mm-hmm. Okay, end of the machaber. If you put this chametz cover onto a pot on Pesach, meaning you didn't kasher it, you didn't kasher and you put it onto the pot on Pesach. So what's it in? Kol hatapsul asur. All the Pesach food is asur. Why? Because now the Zei'ah that was absorbed into the cover from chametz gets now mixed into the kosher food, because there's going to be Hevel from the new pot, and now the chametz from the cover will get absorbed into the pot and make the food also even b'diavad.
What type of cover are we talking about? How old is the cover? Was used Erev Pesach for chametz?
Yankee, mamash mechaber. So I'm about to say that. I have to just say one thing before I say that.
Since I'm in food, sir.
Okay, there's a machlokes whether usually something that's ain't ben yom is mutter b'diavad. But the machlokes whether on Pesach something that's ain't ben yom is mutter b'diavad. That's the machlokes when you Pesach. The mechaber is mekel. It says ain't ben yom is mutter, and the Ramah is machmer. So the Sharatin says, according to the mechaber, that ain't ben yom is mutter, this din is going to have to be talking about on the first day of Pesach. This is going to have to be talking about that you use the chametz to cover for chametz within Erev Pesach.
Not even became Ein Ben Yom on Pesach.
Yes, according to Mechaber, Ein Ben Yom is mutter. So it has to be talking about that you used it right before Pesach. You mean on Erev Pesach in the morning you use it, and then on Pesach.
I got used this.
Okay, use this. Yeah. Okay, of course. I got used Pesach. Correct. That's right. But for a normal person, you think this is a very common thing. The guy on Pesach morning, he pulls something out of his dishes, and he sticks it onto the pot. And he forgot the first thing that you're supposed to hide your chametz in the can. Well, some kid pulled the pot out of the cover and he sticks it onto the pot. So now the mechaber thinks if it's ben yom, the mechaber. No, according to the mechaber, it's only if it's on Yom Tov. So then it'll be the mechaber says also means only if it's ben yom,
right?
Or if it's 30. Okay, well, so that's the normal case. That if it's ben yom, but. What happens?
Something you know, sir. Obviously, something you know.
I don't. Okay, but the Mishnah says, but the Ramah holds that Ein Ben Yom is mutter is also even with the Yevon on Pesach. So the Ramah will have an easy way to understand this thing. It could be any day of Pesach. Anytime you use a chametz to cover, even though it's Ein Ben Yom, it doesn't make a difference. It's also okay. So now, what would you say if a guy had a cover that wasn't on Pesach? It was Erev Pesach. Okay, it was when the chametz is not the mashu. When there's no. Ein Ben Yom is not also.
No, Ein Ben Yom in the afternoon.
When chametz is not. When Pesach is not. Chametz is not also the mashu at that point.
Right.
So would you say that the food is also the cover was Ein Ben Yom?
I'm sure it's much like this.
Every person who would, most people who ask this question to would say is, it's Ein Ben Yom. Ein Ben Yom is not. It's not a Pesach. Only on Pesach is the Ramah machmir that Ein Ben Yom is also, but not usually. So to that, the Mishnah told a Ramah in your day, a very surprising Ramah. It's surprising, but it is a Ramah. Who says? The Ramah says there's a minute that a cover of a pot, even though it's Ein Ben Yom, it still makes food also b'diavad. That's what the Ramah says. Especially for covers, that covers make food also b'diavad, even though they're Ein Ben Yom. It doesn't make difference to make them also b'diavad. The Ramah says, and you should know, this minute has no pshat in it. This is a minhag below time. There's no sense to it. He says, Ramah says, there's no one talking. He says, this minhag has no pshat in it. He says, but we do it anyhow.
Where's this in your again?
Tzadik Gimel. There's only one halacha in Tzadik Gimel is easy to find. There's one, and the Ramah says, this has no pshat to it. He says, but we do it anyhow. Except, he says, if you have a reason to meet a tzara, some reason to say why the thing should be mutter anyhow, so fine, then you don't have to be machmir for this meal. What did you say? Which is what?
No, we're talking about.
I would say as far away the pot is because you can never really clean a good cover to get off.
So see, yes, he knows this right there.
So it's worse than a pot itself.
Right, it's worse than the pot.
Yeah,
it's worse than the pot. So the Taz and the shop say,
you look at your pots at home and you will see your covers are dirtier than your pots.
So the Taz and the shop say, the Taz and the shop say the pshat is like this. The Taz and the shop say the pshat is like this. The reason for this minhag is like this. There are pots, not all covers, but there's such a thing as covers that come to a point or have, other kinds of nooks and crannies in them because of the way a cover is made, different than a pot, and food could get stuck in there. And since food could get stuck in those little places, therefore, even if it's Ein Ben Yom, it doesn't help because it's the end in this place. So the reason for the machmir, now this is not really min hadin, it's just a minhag to be machmir for this thing, but the reason why those people say that it should be also is because food might get stuck in that little spot. Therefore, we say pot, even though Ein Ben Yom are after the food anyhow. That's where the minhag comes from.
So there's not shish. What do you have? You have shishim connected the whole pot.
So that's the shot of the Taz and the shop. So against the little piece or the whole pot.
That's what I'm saying. You have to,
now.
That's not for now.
Not for now. So the Mishnah says. So in Cain, the same thing goes over here also. If the guy cooks in a pot, put the cover, a chametz cover onto a pot, even if it was before Pesach, it would be usher. It would be usher, even if it was Ein Ben Yom. The Ramah holds it's Ein Ben Yom on Pesach. Of course it's usher. except Makom Hefseruba. But over here, even on Erev Pesach, he says it should be the same thing. Now, I don't know why he says it's only on Erev Pesach, because the Ramah in your day doesn't do it Erev Pesach. What's if the Chatzos is worse? But the Mishmur sounds like he's only saying it after Chatzos. For whatever reason, the Mishmur says you should be Machmir, so he brings this Ramah. The Ramah says you should be Machmir at the cover, and I never heard of someone being Machmir for this minute, but that's the Ramah says. The Ramah, you won't the Ramah, you'll see what he says. Now,
somebody said today we don't have to be Machmir?
No, I'm just saying it's just a. When you ask a person, just when I saw it, I said, "Well, I don't remember seeing that Ramah like that." But if you would ask me the question before I did this, I said, "What would I do? By mistake, I put the cover on the thing." He said, "You haven't used it today, and it would be mutter."
Right.
You would, okay, unless the person really knows what he's saying, most of you would expect to answer just, "Oh, say it in so it's mutter," and not to be special, have a special chumrah for a cover. Now, they're talking about a chumrah about to be machmir for all covers, and I just want to point it out that we saw this in the company. The two of us saw it in the company recently, and it's in other companies also, that on top of a kettle, sometimes in kettle, instead of a cover, just a plain old cover, they have, the kettle is roundish, and on the top it has like a complete thing that, like a dome on the top of it, and the dome has in it a vent that lets out vapors out of it. The companies are doing it to control the vapors from getting into the plants. They don't want to heat up the plants, or they don't want to destroy the atmosphere, so they want to catch those vapors for whatever reasons why they have for doing it. So what they're doing is they're building like a cover over their kettle, not like as a plain old cover, but as a way to trap to direct the vapors in a certain direction. Okay, it's similar to what people use in food service, a simple kind of thing, a hood over an oven that also directs vapors in a certain direction. Okay? So what I'm bringing up, of course, that cover has to be kashrus like any other cover. And this is the cover what I meant. I said there's such a thing, there are covers, there's such a big vent, you don't have the Hevel there building up under it, because there's something exhausting all the stuff out of it. But I'm mentioning it because what the Taz and Shach say about the end getting stuck, this is the kind of a case where the end gets stuck. Things, the whole day people are cooking in this, and things, the vapors and pieces of food are getting out, that up into those vents, pieces of food can get, not big hunks of food, but over time get a build-up of food, can get up over there. And the natural thing to do is you look into the kettle and say, the kettle's clean, we're ready to kasher, and you got to look up also to see what's going on up there, to see that there isn't food that's trapped into there.
You had it up in there, it's so small.
Yeah, this was it's a big vent. It was
like a vent, like a dryer.
Yes, it's a big vent. The idea here is they're trying to direct the vapors either out of the plant, they don't want to heat up the plant, or they want to direct it to a place that they can clean it before they let it into the atmosphere, that the whole place doesn't smell like tomato sauce. The whole neighborhood. So it has to be clean, but it has to be clean. But the Kashering, it's just as a cover. You have to deal with it. So if let's say for the Kashering, you have to think about, does it get Yatzal split over there? Right, because this din, I should have mentioned, the din of Zei'ah, when Zei'ah rises up and hits something, it's only when the Zei'ah itself, or the thing that it hits, are Yatzal split. And once it gets to
how else would you get up there for wasn't
Yatzal? What did you say? What should be called kafote?
Whatever the degrees of during the cooking, that's what should be in kashrus.
Okay, so you're right. You're right. You say if during cooking it got over Yatzal split, you could eat about kafote.
Hours to get to if that's they're producing all day.
So you think it's what?
So it goes to 190 degrees, that's 200 degrees. So you can kashrus for 10 minutes.
So you cannot do, you can't just cook up the water and say the vapors come up.
Not let it go for a while.
Either you have to do it for a long time,
you got to chug it up,
or you have to do something like a spray ball that's going to hit the top there also. And you have to direct boiling water up to there, because you have to think about kashrus. I'm not talking about the kashrus, the hagdolah shaboy. I'm talking about is that the end that's going to be stuck up there. I'm trying to explain. This Taz and Shach, we're talking about these funny covers with a little hole, like a point to it. That they're talking about as a chumrah. There is such a real thing that you have to turn your head the other way instead of just looking down. I'll tell you in a second. As I was just bringing it out, I don't know whether people are or not machmir for this Ramah over there, but the point that the Taz and Shach, that's what I'm trying to figure out, that it comes up in industrial, in the hood, it could be also, it's not as much in the hood.
You don't have to worry about the minutes so much.
No, but I'm talking about the end. But they're bringing out a point that the end gets trapped up there. That's what I'm trying to say.